Good evening, and welcome once again to Crabtowne USA. Tonight, we'll give you a little bit of information on St. Patrick's Day. We'll show you where the finest electric guitar in the United States of America is made on West Street. We'll also show you the latest in vending machines. So stay with us, and we'll be right back. For 10 years, Paul Reed Smith has made the finest handmade electric guitar in the country. Now, the biggest names in the business play his instruments, and with the resulting increase in demand, he's just about to open a factory in Annapolis.
Paul, before we get into your incredible instruments and future plans, I'm sure our viewers would like to know just how and why you chose building a better guitar as your dream.
Playing guitar is something I always wanted to do, you know, from the time you get the little piece of junk, you know, when you're in junior high school.
Yeah, we all had one of those.
After I started playing guitar, it just started to become very obvious to me that I wanted to build them. It's not explainable. It's just true. Haven't you ever had a hunch that you knew something but you didn't know why you knew it?
Yeah.
There it is.
That's it. Fantastic. Okay. When did you build the first one?
In 1976, I made one as an independent study project at college. I built it in the basement of the art building. There would be a jewelry class going on right next to me while I was sitting there with actually, I sort of made the first one with a pocket knife. It was that rough. Actually, you remember, you were there.
Sure, I remember the guitar.
Yeah.
What did the jewelry class think about this guy building a rock and roll guitar in the next room?
I think everybody was interested, and they scratched their head a little bit. You know, like that. And the art teacher helped me a lot. I mean, you know, his name was Earl Hoffman, and he spent a lot of time with me, just trying to guide me in the right direction, you know, help me where he could. Lend me tools, give me some of his time, talk to me when I was lonely, that sort of thing.
Tell us a little bit about how you sold the first one.
Well, Ted Nugent was playing at the Capitol Center, and I showed up about 12 noon, and I had guitars under my arms, and I actually pulled a real stunt. I ran into the room and said, "I'm late, where's the stage?" And the guys went, "That way." I swear that happened.
And they just let you right on there and pointed to the stage.
And I went and I talked to the roadies and showed them the guitars, and they said, "I'll just introduce you to Ted. Ted's always interested in stuff," and it went from there.
What was it about the guitars you were used to playing that you felt wasn't there in the Ultimate guitar?
At the time, absolutely nothing. I was really enjoying the old Les Pauls that were around, and I was just hoping at the time to be able to get somewhere near them. I never thought that we'd actually make improvements.
Was one of your first sales to Frampton major sales?
Yeah, I built a guitar for Ted Nugent, and I showed Peter Frampton the guitar before I took it to Ted at the Capitol Center. And he said he'd like me to make him a guitar, and we talked about specifically sort of what it would be like, and he said he'd call me. Well, he never called me, but I made the guitar anyway, and he showed up at American University, and I showed it to him. I said, "This is what what we talked about making," and he fell in love with it and gave me some money, and it was downhill from there.
Did he help
That's when Peter's career was taking off, just as it was blasting off.
Did that help introduce you to other big name stars?
Yeah, because what I did was I took that guitar and I went around and showed all the other bands that came to town right before I gave the guitar to Peter. It was about a week where I had the guitar finished, and I hadn't given it to him yet because he was out on the road. So I went and showed Little Feat and Al Di Meola, and all these bands came to town right at that period of time where in that week span it was really ironic that so many good bands would be in town at that time. I think Ted Nugent was in town, Aerosmith was in town, Leonard Skinner was in town. I mean, so many bands in that 1 week span, and I just went and showed everybody. And so I capitalized on the fact that he hadn't gotten his guitar yet, and I showed the thing to everybody.
Okay, let's get into the Ultimate guitar. Earlier you told me you considered three main factors in designing and building your instruments. Its looks, its feel in the player's hands, and the sound that it produces. How about starting with these concepts and show us how your guitar fulfills these requirements? Let's go with the looks first. What's important about the looks of the instrument?
Well, I tried to come up with a very classic design, something that had contours that were something that someone would immediately feel comfortable with. It's very symmetrical from here back, somewhere in between an old Les Paul and a Stratocaster. And then from here up, I've tried to come up with something that's it balances well when you set it on your leg. When you hang it from a strap, it balances well. Yet it looks, a Strat player would pick it up and say, oh, this thing looks fine, and a Les Paul player would pick it up and say, this thing looks fine. So I've sort of tried to go right down the middle, something that both kind of players would feel comfortable with. There are Stratocaster players and Fender players, and then you have your Gibson players, and usually in two separate areas. And most recently, people have been buying a Les Paul and then they buy a Strat, and they sort of switch guitars and tunes, and the idea of this was you wouldn't have to do that. Aesthetically, I think we've really accomplished that. As far as the sound of the thing, I've got this rotary pickup system, which you can get the sounds of a Stratocaster and an old Gibson and some new ones too. And so we've been making our own pickups. Actually, this has gotten more notoriety recently than almost anything, the sound of the pickups. There's been articles in major magazines about the way this stuff sounds. I always wanted a guitar that sounded like a Stratocaster, sounded like a Gibson, sounded like an old Les Paul Jr., sounded like the guy in Queen, that real kind of hollow tone. And so we've designed a pickup system that actually sounds like all these guitars. There's a rotary switch that has 5 positions that you can get all these different sounds out of. Actually, what happens is that every time you go to a new switch setting, the pickups are wired completely differently. And it literally sounds very, very different. The bass pickup, and then a Stratocaster tone, which is very similar to, say, the guy in Dire Straits tone. And his sound will be, you know, it's a real kind of a hollowish tone, which is very different than the first tone I showed you. The Strat would be. Or you can get a kind of a real powerful out of phase tone. Or you can get a real kind of a wail treble. Or you can get the bass pickup all the way up, which is an old like Clapton tone. Or you can sweeten it up and it's real like almost Carlos Santana. So you get a variety of tones all on the same guitar, and then you can go right back to that Strat tone.
Without making any adjustments in an amplifier or any foot switches or nothing. It's all done by the guitar.
Yeah, you didn't see me touch anything.
Now, you have a factory for PRS guitars in the works. What's the story on that?
Well, it's a 5,500 square foot. If you print that, I'll kill you. It's a 5,500 square foot factory over in the industrial park behind Old Magruder's on West Street. We've completely built it just for making guitars. It's air conditioned and heated and humidity controlled, both dehumidified for the summer and humidified for the winter. So you keep a relative humidity of 40% in the building all year long. That way your necks don't warp and do funny things. If you take a piece of mahogany and you run it from 30% relative humidity to 50, it'll bend on you. It really, humidity has a huge effect on wood, so we have to actually be atmosphere controlled in the building, and that's all done. It's all insulated. We've got some of the machinery in there. We're getting ready to purchase the rest of the machinery. It's been painted. It's actually very beautiful.
Why a factory?
Well, I think it would be quite impossible to build 200 guitars a month in this little room. I don't think we could fit 200 cases in this room.
For sure. What brought about the idea of expanding production that much?
Well, there's a real pent-up desire for these things. When we went out, I went out on a 10-day tour and actually took about $300,000 worth of orders, just like that, which is something that other companies would spend months trying to do. They've heard of me, they want the instruments already, they get them in their hands and they go, oh, okay, we'll take as many as we can get. So there's a real market for them at this point. Fender's been sold, Gibson's not doing very well, and so the market's actually wide open anyway, and people have heard of the things for years and would like to buy them.
So you're going to get into more prolific production.
You know, an instrument like this, it used to cost about $2,000 from me, and we're talking about having more of a more reasonable list price, somewhere about $1,350 or $1,150 if it's the simpler model.
How's the quality going to be between the two? Are you aiming for the same level of quality?
I don't feel that we'll have any problems achieving the same quality or actually higher. In a factory, you have jigs and fixtures, things that when you put a neck blank in and you do the operation, it cuts it exactly right. And I used to sit there with a pencil and have to draw the operation on every time, and it left a lot of room for human error. And now we're going to try to eliminate the large area of human error in building these things. Actually, there'll be a machine that'll come around and cut this neck exactly as shape instead of me having to draw it with a pencil and go around and cut it with a bandsaw and then rerouter it and you know.
So all your rough work will be taken care of by machines and the rest be taken care of still by hand?
Specifically, I would have to say no. A lot of the stuff will be taken care of with the machines. The top is carved with a machine already. We have a machine that did carve this top. The plans I was showing you were for rounding the fingerboards, a sanding machine. I used to do this by hand. This will be done with a machine now. The carve in the back of the neck, I used to do by hand. I have a machine that carves the back of the neck. I used to cut out all the birds by hand. I have a company that's going to ship them in for me. I used to wind the pickups with a Dremel motor tool and a Variac. I'm going to have a pickup coil winding machine. We used to make the bridges one at a time. We're actually setting up production to make the bridges by the thousands. So most of the hand steps, quote unquote hand steps with a chisel and a hammer, that sort of thing, will be eliminated. All the steps were done by hand. I mean, if it was the Martin factory, they would say this is a handmade guitar. I'm not going to go that far and call it a handmade guitar anymore. But I think it'll be the same quality. Actually, I'm actually aiming to improve the quality. Real consistent guitar to guitar, have it very consistent.
Well, Paul, I can see here that with such a remarkable instrument to your credit, you should have no major problems finding your financial support. We'd like to thank you for sharing your marvelous talent with us this evening on Crabtowne. We'll be looking forward to seeing you on stage.
Thank you. I appreciate you coming over.
Our pleasure.